Okay, so as you can tell by this list, you obviously know how my Pixar tier list go. My tier list go A, B, C, D, F down to the worst. A is the best. B is still good. C is right there in the middle, but still kind of good. D is pretty much kind of bad, but still not very good. And F is obviously the worst. So, and we're doing all these movies in chronological order. So as you can tell, it's from Toy Story all the way to Turning Red. So with that, let's get started. And we're going to start off with the original movie that started it all, Toy Story. And I'm going to go ahead and put this movie right in the A tier. I just love this movie. It's a classic. It's a classic for every Pixar movie fan. It's just an idea that everybody loves. Sorry, let me clear all these. I'm always getting these things. What I just personally loved about this movie was that it's just a story that everybody loves. It's a story that's originally well crafted. The characters are all great. It's the first computer animated movie of all time, and the theme about like childhood and nostalgia and being there for your kid, especially on a toy's perspective, I thought was very interesting. And also, the movie is just a classic with all the lines, all the characters, like I just said before. So there's just a lot of things I love about this movie, and also every time I rewatch it, I just love it even more. Then we have A Bug's Life. I'm gonna put this movie right here in the C tier. I don't think it's as good as some of the other Pixar movies that they've released, but it's still a good movie. The characters are still nice. The animation, it's kind of good, but not really that great. The story itself is pretty clever. The villain is pretty terrifying. Those grasshoppers are pretty scary. So, and you do have a good cast, especially when it comes to later Pixar films. Then we have Toy Story 2. I'm going to put this film in the B tier because while it is a sort of a top tier Pixar movie, I would still say it's still very good. Obviously, there's a lot of classic stuff when it comes to this, especially when it comes to Jesse's backstory, which I think is another great way to continue the themes about this whole franchise. It also just has a lot of great humor jokes, like the Buzz Lightyear with the fancy utility belt being related to the Zurg toy and having like all these Star Wars relations to it. I love that. There's also like the whole toy store in Al's Toy Barn. I just love that place. It just looks so cool. The fact that and also Buzz Lightyear was probably my favorite part of this movie, as it's like the opening sequence where we get to see Buzz Lightyear in the video game. Just all these awesome moments are in this movie. Countless times. I love it. But there is a lot that goes on in that it's not as a simple story, whereas Toy Story was a simple story. There's just a lot going on that it's a little bit hard to process all of it. So it is going to go in the B tier, though. Next up we have... sorry about that. Next up we have Monsters, Inc., which I'm going to put right there in that A category. I just think that this is another great classic Pixar movie where it has probably one of the best Pixar duos in Pixar history with Mike and Sully. It's also just very funny. The story is pretty clever, as these monsters are working at this place to power their city by having screen power by kids from the human world, and that's clever. The villains are pretty cool and pretty threatening. The cast is great with John Goodman and Billy Crystal, just great casting, and then also the emotions also really work. So, it pretty much does everything I love. And it's also just really rewatchable. But you know what pretty much does better than everything? Finding Nemo. Which I'm going to put that movie in the A tier as well, at the top. Because Finding Nemo is easily, probably my favorite, it's my favorite Pixar film. I'm saying it right now. It's my favorite Pixar movie. And the reason for that is just because it's an awesome movie. You know, the story between a father and a son is really well handled in the movie, as he goes through the journey of losing pretty much 399 of his kids, but having that last one, and he'll do whatever it takes because he lost his wife and 399 of his kids. He doesn't want to lose his son. And beyond that, the music is also amazing. The animation is simply amazing with the way they did the water. Dory is an awesome character. All the other characters, especially the kids, and the kids on the fish in the fish tank at the dentist office. They're all great. It's also incredibly rewatchable. It's quotable. So for me, this is a top tier Pixar movie. Then we have The Incredibles. I'm gonna be honest here. I'm not like everyone else that sees this as the best superhero movie of all time, or at least the best animated superhero movie of all time. But what can I say about this movie? It's very enjoyable. It has a lot of classic scenes, a lot of classic moments. The action is also great. It's just cool to see a superhero film directed by Pixar, and I love that. So you're gonna go up in the B tier, but the problem here is that the story just seems too simple, and the villain doesn't seem that complex. And it pretty much is a copy of Riddler from Batman Forever, Aldrich Killian from Iron Man 3, and Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. That's pretty much what Syndrome is, because he starts out as a guy that starts out as the big superhero, super fan of the superhero, but then turns to be the villain because the hero rejected them. And that's not really interesting to me. And also, his plan is not that interesting. Then we have Cars. I'm going to go ahead and put this movie right in that B tier as well. I actually like this movie. Like, it took me a few rewatches to actually really like this movie. Obviously, the premise is not what makes the movie good, but the story and the characters, I would actually say, is pretty good. And the theme in here is also pretty good. Lightning McQueen, great characters. The characters are great. The animation and the racing scenes are great. The cast is great. It's just a pretty good Pixar movie. Then we got Ratatouille, which is probably Pixar's weirdest movie. I don't know if I said this, but I believe Turning Red is Pixar's weirdest film. I believe Ratatouille is Pixar's weirdest movie, because it basically talks about a rat wanting to cook by pulling a man's hair. That's the weirdest idea I've ever heard of. That cannot happen in real life. But they crafted it with all of Brad Bird's isms, with cool action sequences and very cool rat humor. And this is honestly one of the movies where when you watch it, you need to have a snack with you. Like, you need to have a snack that's going to last you through the entire movie, because the food that Remy eats, or any other food that the characters eat, you just hear the sounds of the way they're eating it, and it sounds scrumptious. That's all I'm going to say. But yeah, the themes are great. The animation is also pretty great. The music is great. And the themes are also really great too. So I just really like Ratatouille. But unfortunately, there is a movie that I'm not the biggest fan of, which is WALL-E. And I'm going to be honest here. I'm going to put this movie right in the C tier, because I do remember when I first watched it, I actually did like it. So I'm not going to go too hard on it though. But it's just, I just don't get why everybody loves it so much. Sure, it's a cool story out in space, and it, much like most people, as it is most of it of the time it's a silent movie, I think it works better as a short Pixar movie. Like, they released a short film of this movie called Bernie. Felt like that short film could have been the movie for this. I don't know why, but it could have, if that makes sense. But yeah, I don't really like WALL-E as much as everybody else. Up, I'm actually going to put this in the A tier category. For me, I just love this movie. It's just, every single time I watch it, it gets heartfelt. Like, those first 10 minutes of Pixar, it's probably some of the best of Pixar they've ever done. Probably better than the opening of Toy Story 4 or the opening of any other Pixar movie. Or even better than the opening of Finding Nemo. I think it's better than that. But, like, even more than that, the characters are great. The music is astounding. The story is pretty cool. The villain side of things I'm not really the biggest fan of. But it's really just the emotion of it. It's probably the most emotional Pixar film we personally have ever gotten, and I love that. And it's just a film that I just love going, every time I watch it, I just love it more and more. Then we got Toy Story 3. I'm going to go ahead and put this in the A tier as well, because I think that this was a great conclusion to the Andy trilogy, where it goes back to that theme of whether, because Andy is in a very different place now, he's going to college, and whether it's at college or in the attic, their job is to be there for Andy. Whether he's not playing with them anymore, they still have to be there for him. and they handled that theme very well in the movie. Along those same lines, the characters and the animation, they still stick in the movie, and the emotions, the payoff moments in this film are amazing, and it's just awesome to see it, and it's just great. Like when you get to that scene when they're about to die, like you actually feel heartfelt. Like, are they about to die? Like, is this the end of Toy Story? But then you pick up the claw, and then Andy plays with his toys with Bonnie for the last time, and it's like, and my sister says that I saw this in the movie theater, but I don't remember seeing this in the theater. I don't, but I remember seeing it a lot when I was younger, so that's a plus. But this is a movie that will always stay in my heart and will be one of my favorite Pixar movies ever. Then we got Cars 2. After a couple of rewatches after this summer, I'm going to put this in the F tier. I think the story of them doing spy stuff just is so weird and so out of this world. And taking Mater as the main character kind of works, but then doesn't. And I mean, the action sequences still do work, but it's like it's so out of place and so out of this world that it doesn't need to happen. Obviously, if you had magical elves doing magic, that would make sense because some elves can do stuff like that. But the fact that cars are around and moving and fighting, that's not really the most interesting thing. Then we have Brave. I'm going to put this in the D tier because I do like some things from this movie. The animation is still great. The music is still great. But the problem here is that it handles this story of parents' expectations for their child. And I don't really think they handled this storyline very well. And then they turn into a bear, and then they have to stop a bear guy, and they have to they're doing so much stuff, and that it just doesn't add up. And the humor kind of works in a way, but it's just too dirty humor. So it's just a movie that does a little too much. But at the same time, whenever I watch it, I still enjoy it. Then we got Monsters University. I'm going to put this in the C tier. I don't think it's one of the best Pixar movies, but I would still say it's a worthy sequel of, or at least a worthy prequel of Monsters, Inc., where they take these characters that we knew and loved from the first movie and put them into, and introduce them as college students. And I thought the way they did it worked. You know, the music, like, honestly, I love the score to this movie. And I was like, why is it so good? And my sister was literally telling me because it's the music of a marching band. And I'm like, oh yeah, because there's marching bands in college. So it makes sense. And there's marching bands at college universities. So it makes sense. But what also worked is that the characters and stuff, the way that the theme, like, it's okay to fail. I love that. The characters are also likable. The animation is pretty good. So there's just a lot of things I really enjoyed about this movie. And I think it's a little bit underappreciated, though. It's not the best Pixar movie, though. Then we got Inside Out. Probably one of the best Pixar movies since Toy Story 3, in my opinion. And this is actually going to go up in that A tier because I just love this movie to death. It's just this movie really showed how good Pixar is of making movies. It just tells this theme that I honestly love the way they did the story, and the premise worked so well. It's clever and it works so well, where you have all these emotions and it's up to Joy to keep Riley happy no matter what. She can't be sad, she can't be angry, she can't fear anything, she can't be disgusted. She has to be happy. And when you realize that she can't be happy all the time, and when joy and sadness lose the core memories and get out of headquarters, you start to kind of relate into the story, and you start to realize the theme that you can't be happy all the time because we're human, and especially when we're on a move, when we're going into a new life, we're not gonna feel the same. We're gonna sometimes have to cry, and we're sometimes gonna have to feel different emotions. And I really thought that was a very cool exploration thing to do. And sometimes you're gonna lose things that you loved as a child, especially when Bing Bong dies. So it's probably, and like I said, how Up is the most emotional Pixar movie, I would say that this is the most emotional Pixar movie because it almost put a tear in my eye when I was younger and I was first starting to watch this. But beyond that, the characters are amazing. The animation is amazing, and the story is great. So everything about this movie is pretty much pitch perfect. Don't really see any problems with this movie. Then we have the Good Dinosaur. I'm gonna put this movie in the D tier as well. Now, much like Brave, whenever I watch it, I still love it. I mean, not love it, but I still really enjoy it. But and obviously the animation is still amazing. There's just a lot of shots in here that just look like very cartoonish, and I love it, or at least look like a comic book. But I will say this: there are some scenes that just do not work. I mean, like, there's literally a scene where where Arlo and Spot like eat these berries, and they like transform into their body, transforms into his head, and it's like, are they doing drugs? Like, are they on drugs? And it's just very awkward, and like you actually get to see a pterodactyl eat a creature, and it's just not, no. Like, this is a very weird film, but at the same time has some like story beats of like Lion King in a way, and I don't really think it works. But at the same time, the animation, and there are some emotional moments with the dad dying. So I can still give it credit for that. Then we got Finding Dory, and much like Monsters University, I would still say that this is actually a pretty good sequel. Obviously, there were some people that were skeptical for this because they didn't like what they did with Cars 2 and making Mater the main character, and this is the same thing where they take Dory to be the main character. But if I'm being honest, I think Dory works as a main character. As the way they use her forgetting things, not as a joke anymore, but as the main plotline of a movie, and you actually feel bad for Dory, but at the same time, there's also moments where you can laugh at it too, along those and the way that she actually uses it to like connect with her friends and stuff, and it's so cool the way they did it. The characters are pretty nice. Her parents are a cool addition. Becky is a very funny character. Hank is a great character. Bailey and Destiny are great characters, and the animation is also astounding, especially after coming 17 years later or something like that. The cast still is amazing, even though they recasted Nemo. I still really like this movie, though it's not as good as the original Finding Nemo. Then we got Cars 3. This is another weak Pixar movie, which I'm going to put in the D tier. When I first watched it, I would say that it was my favorite Cars movie because I was just so astounded of how enjoyable it was. But at the same time, there's just some beats that it copies, like Rocky 3, where Rocky was like very heartfelt of losing Mickey, and this is the same thing with this movie where he doesn't like to lose, and he's kind of still astounded by what happened with Doc Hudson as he passed away, but it's also because the actor that played him passed away. And it is sad in a way, but then when you get to the race, Cruz Ramirez is a cool character. When you get to the race, it's just kind of weird, I guess, and you make a new legacy, I guess, but it's kind of weird in the way they take directions on things. Then we got Coco, probably one of the classic Pixar movies in my opinion. The animation, simply astounding. The characters are amazing. The story is great. Pretty much everything about this movie is pretty much great, but it's too great in my opinion. That the storyline, the twists and turns are a little bit predictable at times, and so it could be a little bit weird at times. But at the same time, I still love this movie. Then we got Incredibles 2. I'm gonna put this in that A tier, in the B tier category. I just think that this movie is a much better film than the original Incredibles, and both of them are in the same tier. But Incredibles 2 is a much better movie, in my opinion, because the way they were able to master the action, the characters, the story, the themes, everything about the movie is just a better version of what The Incredibles did. The characters have better character moments, the action and animation is amazing, and you actually care about all of it, and you actually care about what the story is, and you just care about everything that's going on, and I love that. And the villain is actually a little bit better than Syndrome, and she actually has like a little bit of a better opinion. on what superheroes should be. So I love that. Then we got Toy Story 4. I was actually really excited for this movie when it first came out. And when I first saw it, I was a bit mixed on it. But then, as time has come, I have learned to actually love this movie. So for me, Toy Story 4 is actually going to go in that B tier. I just think it's one of the best, it's one of the better Pixar films, in my opinion. Because throughout the entire movie, we get Woody's character arc as... And it pretty much goes throughout the entire Toy Story trilogy. But mostly in this movie, where he doesn't have anything else. All he wants to do is help Bonnie and be there for the kid. He was made for a child, and he's just trying so hard. And in the ending, I guess you could say I understand what his story is coming from, where he was meant for a child. So now he can be for kids all over he can help kids all over the world, and I love that. Along those same lines, I love the way that we actually got to explore different new types of toys. We got to explore Duke-a-Boom, Giggle McDimples. We got to see Bo Peep again. The Gabby Gabby is probably one of the best Pixar Toy Story villains of all time. So I really like this movie, even though the storyline with Forky, which I do like Forky, was a little bit weird. I still love this movie. And also, I wish we could have seen the original cast, the characters again. And also, R.I.P. Don Rickles. I can't believe that he was able to record some lines for this movie, even though it was 2019 when this movie came out. Then we got Onward. I'm going to go ahead and put this movie right in that C tier, which I actually think it does a pretty good job of doing all these emotions. And it's kind of relatable in a way because it's a sibling relationship, and I have a sister, and it's kind of something like this. And I met my dad. My dad's still alive. He lives with me right now. But it's relatable in ways where he's kind of the father, and that sometimes your bigger sibling, your older sibling, can be your parent figure, and that's technically how my sister was most of the time back in the day, because my mom and dad worked a lot, and my sister took care of me a lot, and so she was really a parent figure for me. And so it's very relatable in that way. But also you get a reunion of Star-Lord and Spider-Man 1 year later after them being in Avengers Endgame. I mean, obviously this has nothing to do with superheroes, at least in Onward. But the animation is also pretty cool. It's a pretty cool adventure action story, fantasy story. I don't really know what issues I have with it, but I will say it's a good movie, though it's not Pixar's best. Then we got Soul. I'm gonna be honest. This is a film that took me a second rewatch to actually start to love this movie. Because when I first watched it, I just thought it was a good movie. But after rewatching it, and if I didn't rewatch it, I would probably put it in this tier. But if I'm being honest, now that I rewatched it, I'm going to put it in the A tier. I just think that this is one of Pixar's best films. And the reason why I love it so much is because of the theme. Where throughout the entire movie, we're exploring Joe, where his dream, his purpose, where he thinks his purpose is to play in the jazz club, to play jazz music. He doesn't want to be a jazz teacher at a middle school anymore. He wants to be a jazz musician. And you start to realize that he doesn't want to do that. And you start to realize that he's so passionate about his dream that he's not looking at the little things in life. And that's very relatable for anyone that is so passionate about something. And like, there's multiple scenes in here, like the barber's sequence. I would say is probably like my favorite sequence of the entire film, where they're talking about purposes, and like, it's just amazing. And this was like a film that I was watching when I was like sick. I watched this movie back in July, and I still loved it. And I was like sick at the time, and I was like in a mood, and I was like getting excited for this movie. And I was like, I loved it. I love the theme. And it's just so relatable to everyone. Along those same lines, while it does copy a story template of two characters needing to get to a specific place before a deadline. I know it's been done many times before in Pixar history, but what makes the movie pop is, of course, the characters, the animation is also very funny at times. So with all that combined, it's great, and I hope we actually get a sequel to this, unlike Inside Out. And also, the animation seems very cartoonish at times, especially. Well, actually, I actually will say this before we get to Luca and Turning Red, and that I would, unlike Inside Out, where I like the world of Riley's mind better than the real world in Riley's world, I would actually say that the real life in Soul is actually better than the Great Before world. Just because it's not that interesting and you don't really get much of it. But I'd still love Soul. Then we have Luca. I'm actually going to put this movie right there in this C category. It's not Pixar's best. It told a good story. It told a cool coming-of-age story about two sea monsters wanting to get a Vespa and going off into the distance and exploring the world. And I thought it was a cool story. The animation's also pretty astounding. It's pretty cartoonish. The characters are nice. It's pretty funny at times. But at the same time, it's not Pixar's best. But they do kind of do some cool emotions sometimes. So I thought it was a pretty good Pixar film. And then finally, we're talking about Turning Red. And I posted my review for this movie already. Go check it out. But Turning Red is actually a pretty good Pixar film. And I'm going to put this movie right in the C tier category. Yes, I know I kind of was raving about it in my review. But if I'm being honest, it's not Pixar's best. Pixar's made better movies. And I would still say that this is a very good Pixar film. And that goes for every movie that's in the C category, besides WALL-E. Or actually, you know what? I'm gonna put WALL-E in the D category. I'm sorry, but I don't think it fits in the C category. Or actually, yeah, let's just keep it in the C category. Okay. So Turning Red, obviously, you see my review, but once again, it's just a film that feels relatable, especially for my age, as even though I'm not a teenage girl, I still can relate to it, as girls pretty much go through this all the time. And the animation's also pretty astounding. The characters are great. May's friends are, of course, great. It's pretty funny at times. There are some humor that I don't think works. The way they actually make this whole big climactic thing of a big gigantic red panda never really worked, and the whole history behind that never really worked for me. And Tyler's character is probably the worst character in the entire movie. Overall, this was a pretty enjoyable Pixar film. Another solid Pixar movie to the Pixar canon. So for me, I really enjoyed this movie. And that is my updated Pixar tier list. Wow, this has been a long video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. All my social media stuff is in the about section over there. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.